How do you control a country spread across 17,000 islands, filled with active volcanoes, and home to more than 700 different languages? That is the question running through all of Indonesia history. From ancient empires to the Spice Islands fiercely contested by colonizers, no one has ever truly managed to tame this archipelago. And perhaps the secret lies right there. Indonesia's strength comes from the very chaos that seems impossible to organize. Indonesia is not just a country, it's an archipelago that looks more like a giant puzzle scattered across the sea. Picture more than 17,000 islands stretching over 5,000 miles, cutting across 3 different time zones. The geographic diversity is so immense that traveling from one end to the other feels like stepping into entirely different worlds within the same territory. This alone shows the grandeur of Indonesia history. Now, think of more than 270 million people living across this fragmented space, making Indonesia the 4th most populous country on Earth. And it's not just about numbers, it is also the largest Muslim-majority nation in the world, giving it cultural and political weight on a truly global scale. This plurality shapes how the country tackles its modern challenges, from education to diplomatic decisions. Beyond religion, the linguistic and ethnic diversity is striking. There are 700 languages spoken and more than 1,300 ethnic groups, all coexisting under the same flag. Imagine that, a single archipelago with more languages than many entire continents. This cultural multiplicity creates a melting pot of experiences, traditions, and ways of thinking that, while enriching, also tests the nation's cohesion. To give a practical example, traveling across Indonesia is like flipping through a book that changes chapters with every page. In Sumatra, you feel the weight of the Spice Islands in trade, in Java, the throbbing political energy, and in Papua, a nearly untouched nature still tied to the past. This diverse geography was the stage where the first kingdoms and empires emerged, shaping the path of the region. Long before the great powers turned their eyes to the region, Indonesia history was already being written by peoples who mastered the essentials to survive and thrive. They cultivated rice in fertile lands and sailed between islands with advanced techniques for their time. Picture wooden canoes cutting across the sea, connecting communities that, even though separated by miles of ocean, were already exchanging goods, knowledge, and traditions. In the 7th century, the powerful kingdom of Sriwijaya rose in Sumatra, becoming a hub of trade and spirituality. It wasn't just a wealthy empire. It was also a center of Buddhism, attracting monks and scholars from across Asia. This cultural flourishing left deep marks on the region, still visible today in temples and inscriptions. Controlling the maritime routes gave Sriwijaya a strategic position, almost like the gatekeeper of the Spice Islands. Then came Majapahit, between the 13th and 14th centuries, established in Java. This Hindu empire was known for its political organization and monumental architecture. Palaces, temples, and sculptures told stories of gods and kings that still live on in popular memory. It's as if every stone preserved a reminder of the time when Java was the beating heart of power in Southeast Asia. These ancient kingdoms laid the foundations of Indonesian cultural identity. Art, religion, and trade went hand in hand long before European colonization. What's fascinating is that, even after Majapahit's decline, its legends continue to inspire a sense of greatness and national pride. That past opened the way for an even greater transformation, the arrival of a new faith that would forever change the destiny of the archipelago. The expansion of Islam in Indonesia history did not come through weapons, but through trade routes. Starting in the 13th century, Muslim merchants brought not only spices from the Spice Islands, but also new ideas, values, and beliefs. Unlike many religious conquests, here the transition was gentle, like a tide that slowly rises yet reshapes the entire landscape. This peaceful movement made Islam quickly embraced across various regions. Local rulers realized that adopting this faith was not only a spiritual decision, but also a strategic one. Contact with traders from the Middle East and India strengthened economic and cultural ties. Over time, Mosques began to rise alongside older temples, symbolizing the meeting of traditions. The new religion became a pillar of collective identity, uniting peoples who spoke different languages and lived on distant islands. Imagine a fisherman in Java and a merchant in Sumatra praying toward Mecca at the same moment. This spiritual synchronicity created an invisible web of belonging. That is why, even today, Islam remains the dominant force across the archipelago. But its influence went further. Islam also introduced new ways of thinking about leadership, justice, and social organization. It prepared the ground for Indonesia to face, centuries later, the heavy hand of European colonization. And when those foreigners arrived in search of power and wealth, they encountered a society already transformed by this faith, ready to face even greater challenges. When the Portuguese landed in the archipelago in the early 1500s, Indonesia history took a new turn. Their eyes were fixed on spices, cloves, nutmeg, and pepper from the legendary Spice Islands, products that generated unimaginable fortunes in European markets. It was like discovering oil in a world that couldn't live without flavor. But it didn't take long for the Dutch to seize control. In 1602, they founded the Dutch East India Company, the famous VOC, which became a money-making machine. They didn't just want to trade, they wanted to rule. The region was transformed into the Dutch East Indies, with an economic and political system that placed the islands firmly under foreign domination. For more than 3 centuries, Indonesia lived under relentless exploitation. Heavy taxes drained the local economy, vast plantations were controlled by colonizers, and the population was forced to work under harsh conditions. This system enriched Europeans while local communities struggled to keep their traditions alive. Even so, the era left traces beyond the pain. Trade routes expanded, port cities grew, and cultural exchanges, even if imposed, created a unique blend between East and West. Ironically, this very legacy planted in the people a sense of collective identity, an essential ingredient for Indonesia to one day seek new paths in its own history. In 1942, a new player entered the stage of Indonesia history, Japan. The Japanese expelled the Dutch and took control of the archipelago, promising liberation but delivering a harsh daily reality. The Indonesian people faced rationing, forced labor, and constant surveillance. Yet, this period opened cracks that would change the nation's destiny. Under occupation, many Indonesians received military training. Until then, few had access to such knowledge. But suddenly young men who once worked in plantations or ports were handling weapons, strategies, and military discipline. This training, though imposed, ended up being used in unexpected ways. The Japanese presence also fueled a new sense of inner strength. Despite the hardships, local leaders realized it was possible to organize movements and prepare for autonomy. Small groups that once seemed scattered began to see themselves as part of the same struggle. This awakening would prove crucial in the steps ahead. By the end of the occupation, Indonesia was no longer the same. The sense of dependence on European colonizers had been broken. The people carried scars, but also a newfound confidence in their own capacity. And it was precisely this scenario that paved the way for a bold declaration of Indonesian independence, changing everything from 1945 onward. On August 17, 1945, Sukarno and Mohammed Hatta stepped onto a simple platform and declared what once seemed impossible: Indonesian independence. There were no guarantees they would be heard, but there was something stronger, the conviction that the people were ready to take control of their own destiny. That moment became an eternal symbol in Indonesia history. The foreign response was swift. The Dutch tried to regain control and re-establish the system of the Dutch East Indies, but they faced a nation transformed. The training gained during Japanese occupation and the awakening of national identity gave Indonesians the courage to resist any form of imposition. It was as if every island, from the Spice Islands to Java, echoed in unison, "Enough." For 4 years, resistance, diplomacy, and international pressure followed. Negotiations took place behind closed doors, but in the streets, the sense of unity grew stronger. Young leaders became icons, and the vision of a free Indonesia spread from mouth to mouth. This collective energy proved that, despite enormous challenges, the people would not turn back. Finally, in 1949, under mounting global pressure, the Netherlands officially recognized Indonesian independence. The victory was not only political, but also deeply emotional, marking the beginning of a new era. Yet, with so many ethnicities, languages, and religions coexisting across the archipelago, maintaining national unity would become the next great challenge, perhaps even more complex than winning freedom itself. Winning Indonesian independence was a monumental achievement, but keeping it alive proved far more complicated. Imagine uniting more than 1,300 ethnic groups and hundreds of languages scattered across thousands of islands, a challenge faced by few nations on such a scale. Indonesia history shows that the real struggle began after freedom was won. To handle this diversity, a powerful motto was born, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, which means unity in diversity. It was not just a pretty phrase, but a guiding principle to keep the nation standing. The strategic choice of Bahasa Indonesia as the official language was a masterstroke, simple, practical, and capable of connecting a fisherman in Sulawesi with a student in Sumatra. Even so, the road was far from smooth. Separatist movements emerged in regions like Aceh, Papua, and East Timor, the latter achieving independence in 2002. These episodes revealed that, while the idea of unity was strong, it would always be tested. It was like trying to keep a boat steady in the stormy seas of the Ring of Fire volcanoes, where every wave represents a new tension. And even in the face of such challenges, the national philosophy known as Pancasila helps stitch together differences. It serves as a foundation, reconciling religious, cultural, and social values. But the task has never ended. With each passing decade, Indonesia must reaffirm its unity. And as it seeks that cohesion, another invisible enemy looms on the horizon. Living in Indonesia means living with the unpredictable every single day. The country sits at the very heart of the Ring of Fire volcanoes, a region where tectonic plates collide and create one of the most unstable environments on Earth. There are more than 130 active volcanoes, many of them surrounded by entire cities. It's like living on top of a pressure cooker that could explode at any moment. Indonesia history carries deep scars from these natural phenomena. In 1883, the eruption of Krakatoa released so much energy that giant waves swept away entire villages, claiming the lives of more than 36,000 people. The sound of the explosion was heard thousands of miles away, reaching as far as Australia. Then in 2004, the Sumatra tsunami, triggered by an undersea earthquake, killed more than 230,000 people across several countries. These events are a reminder that, despite its cultural and natural wealth, Indonesia must constantly balance beauty and danger. Imagine waking up to the sight of a majestic volcano, knowing it could erupt within hours. It's no wonder the people have developed a relationship of both respect and fear toward the land itself. What's fascinating is that these disasters, alongside destruction, also shaped the collective character. They taught resilience and the importance of cooperation. Yet, while the people have learned to live with the raw power of nature, other obstacles continue to rise, this time created not by volcanoes or seas. If uniting thousands of islands is already complicated, managing and connecting them all on a daily basis is even harder. Roads cut off by the sea, communities isolated on distant islands, and rugged terrain make logistics an endless puzzle. It's no exaggeration to say this is one of the greatest dilemmas in modern Indonesia history. Take the internet, for example. It does not reach everywhere with the same strength. Only about 73% of the population has reliable access, creating a huge gap between major urban centers and the most remote islands. While young people in Jakarta and Surabaya launch digital businesses, in Papua many still struggle to maintain even a basic stable connection. It's like living into different centuries within the same country. Regional inequalities are also visible in physical infrastructure. Modern ports and busy airports stand in sharp contrast to poor roads in more remote areas. For those living on smaller islands, transporting goods can be costly and take days, directly affecting the local economy. This reality highlights just how much progress is still needed. On the other hand, the government has been trying to turn the tide with ambitious projects. Investments in ports, roads, airports, and digitalization aim to reduce these gaps. But in a territory so vast and diverse, every step forward requires time, resources, and coordination. Meanwhile, Indonesia continues to hold a vital strategic position in global trade. Few countries hold as privileged a position as Indonesia. Located between the Indian and Pacific Oceans, it controls maritime routes that act as lifelines of global trade. The most striking example is the Strait of Malacca, through which ships loaded with oil, gas, and goods flow to supply half the planet. This geography is not just a detail, it's an advantage that defines the weight of Indonesia history on the global stage. Think about it, any disruption along this route would have a direct impact on the prices of energy, food, and technology across several parts of the world. It's as if Indonesia holds an invisible key capable of locking or unlocking the global economy. That's why nations and major powers view the archipelago not only as a partner, but also as a strategic piece in geopolitical disputes. Beyond that, Indonesia is a member of the G20 and has been gaining influence in discussions on energy, the environment, and sustainable development. Its voice grows increasingly relevant, not only because it controls the Spice Islands and their natural resources, but also because it holds logistical points that no other country can easily replace. Yet this prominent role comes with weight, ensuring the security of shipping routes, balancing international interests, and investing in port infrastructure are constant tasks. Jakarta, the current capital, carries a heavy burden. Built on swampy land and weakened by intensive groundwater extraction, the city is sinking at an average rate of 4 to 10 inches per year. Add rising sea levels to the mix, and you have a metropolis of more than 30 million people under daily threat. This is one of the most dramatic chapters of modern Indonesia history. To face the problem, the government made a bold decision to relocate the capital to Nusantara in Borneo. The plan is to build a smart, sustainable, and modern city that can ease Jakarta's overcrowding and symbolize a fresh beginning. But like any major project, this move is not only technical, it's also political and deeply emotional. The cost is enormous, tens of billions of dollars, and the environmental impacts raise concern. Borneo's forests, famous for their unique biodiversity, may suffer from the advance of construction. In addition, local communities express resistance, fearing displacement and loss of identity. It's a reminder that every decision in Indonesia affects not just numbers, but lives. Even so, the project stands as a symbol of transformation. If successful, it could reposition Indonesia as a global example of urban innovation. But while Nusantara rises brick by brick, another issue continues to shape the country's future: the wealth of its natural resources. Indonesia is a true natural vault. Oil, natural gas, coal, rubber, and palm oil form the backbone of an economy that has sustained millions of people for decades. This abundance has shaped Indonesia history, but also created a dangerous dependence. After all, when oil prices fall or commodity markets fluctuate, the entire nation feels the impact. These resources brought prosperity, but also drew external interests. Just as the Spice Islands once drove Europeans to cross oceans centuries ago, today it is Indonesia's energy and mineral reserves that capture the attention of global powers. This external pressure influences internal decisions, showing that natural wealth does not always equal freedom. There is also the environmental dilemma. Intense exploitation, especially of palm oil and coal, has led to deforestation, pollution, and ecological imbalance. This leaves Indonesia facing a hard choice: continue growing through extraction or invest in renewable energy and sustainable models. It's like having a goose that lays golden eggs which, if mistreated, might stop producing. Despite the risks, abundance remains a powerful card. Managed wisely, it can fund infrastructure, technology, and education. Mismanaged, it can trap the country in the old cycle of dependence. And it is precisely within this fragile balance that other internal tensions emerge. Tied to cultural diversity and to regional conflicts, Indonesia is a human mosaic of gigantic proportions. There are more than 1,300 ethnic groups, each with its own traditions, languages, and beliefs. Javanese, Sundanese, Balinese, Batak, Papuans, the list is almost endless. This plurality is the force that enriches Indonesia history, but also the spark that ignites internal conflicts whenever interests collide. In regions like Papua, Aceh, and Maluku, tension has already turned into open conflict. Disputes over autonomy, natural resources, and cultural recognition have shaped the lives of thousands. For many living in these areas, there is a sense that the political center does not always listen to their voices. It feels as if the distance between islands is also a distance in priorities. To deal with these differences, the philosophy of Pancasila emerged. More than just a set of ideas, it is a pact to respect different religions, cultures, and values within one shared territory. It acts as an invisible glue, holding together peoples who, in many parts of the world, would likely be divided into separate nations. Even so, maintaining harmony requires constant effort. Cultural festivals, integration programs, and inclusion policies are only part of the equation. The real challenge lies in balancing local identity with national belonging. And while this process unfolds, the future is already knocking at the door, bringing even more complex issues like climate change, geopolitics, and sinking cities. The future of Indonesia is filled with possibilities, but also with risks. Climate change is already leaving its mark. Coastal cities sinking, islands threatened by rising seas, and increasingly extreme weather events. Indonesia history shows that its people have always been resilient, but today's environmental pressures demand quick and creative solutions. There is also the weight of geopolitics. Being at the center of global trade is an advantage, but it also places Indonesia in the spotlight of rivalries between major powers, especially with China's growing influence. Control over strategic routes and valuable resources is a game in which every move can redefine alliances. On the other hand, the strength of youth and diversity may become the driving force of transformation. With millions of young people connected, even if internet access remains unequal, a generation is emerging that thinks globally while demanding change locally. From green technology innovation to the defense of local cultures, this new voice promises to shape the next chapters. The greatest challenge will be maintaining unity in such a fragmented territory. Reconciling ethnic pride, religious diversity, and external pressures is no simple task. Yet if Indonesia has already endured centuries of colonization, exploitation, and natural disasters, it can also forge new paths toward a solid future, a future still being written with every decision. And this complexity hasn't ended. It continues to shape the nation's present and future. Want to discover more stories like this? Then subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next videos.